Hey kids, this is Bob Swain with the Aniana Church of Christ. We're back again for another kids time. We're going to sing a couple of songs together. We're going to hear a Bible story. We're just really glad that you're here to be with us. Thanks for logging on and watching us either on Facebook with your parents or on YouTube with your parents. We're just glad that you're here. We hope that everybody has a good time tonight. Thank you for being here. Y'all remember last week what we did? We tried to learn the books of the New Testament. Do you remember them from last week? We're going to put them up on the screen up here. You remember what they are? Everybody say them with me. Remember, we went through them twice last week. We're going to go through them twice again this week. Remember what they are: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd. I said 3rd Peter last week, but I was wrong. It's only 1st and 2nd Peter. 1st and 2nd and 3rd John, Jude, and Revelation. Y'all remember those? I put it right at the beginning of the video so your parents can let you log back in and watch the books of the New Testament and learn them. But one of the easiest ways to learn them, and one of the ways that many of us learned it when I was y'all's age, is we used to sing them. Y'all want to sing them with me? Y'all remember the tune? You remember the song? All right, everybody follow the screen and let's learn to sing the books of the New Testament. All right, everybody, let's sing along. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts and the letter to the Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians and Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus and Philemon, Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st and 2nd and 3rd John, Jude and Revelation. All right. Good job, everybody. You do that just a few times, and it won't be long before you'll know all the books of the New Testament. You'll be able to say them without any trouble. And it's always interesting when we sing that little song, because that song will be something you remember for the rest of your life. When I was just a little bitty boy, probably the age of some of you who are watching the show tonight, my mother taught me a song to learn the books of the Old Testament. There are 27 books in the New Testament, 39 books in the Old Testament, 66 books in the Bible, but my mother taught me a song on the books of the Old Testament. And what it did was it not only taught me the books of the Old Testament, it taught me the divisions of the Old Testament, because the Old Testament is divided into sections. For example, the first 5 books of the Old Testament are called the books of the law. Some people call it the Pentateuch. All those books were written by Moses. And then you have the books of history, which tell us the history of the Israelites or the Jewish people. And then you have what we call the books of poetry, books like Psalms that have many psalms and songs written in them. Those oftentimes are called the songs that the Jews sang. And then the rest of the Old Testament was written by prophets. But you had major prophets and minor prophets. 5 minor prophets and 5 major prophets and 12 minor prophets. And so this may be a very new song to you, and I want you to follow along on the screen. The words are going to pop up. I'm fixing to put it up on the full screen so you can see it. And just follow along and learn this tune, because if you learn this tune, you can actually learn the books of the Old Testament. So everybody follow the screen, and let's just see exactly what these books are. You'll see the first books are the books of Moses. So everybody sing along. Let us sing the books of Moses, of Moses, of Moses. Let us sing the books of Moses, for he wrote the law. 1st Genesis, 2nd Exodus, 3rd Leviticus, 4th Numbers, and the 5th is Deuteronomy, the longest of all. Let us sing the books of history, of history, of history. Let us sing the books of history which tell of the Jews. There's Joshua and Judges and the story of Ruth, then 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings, then 1st and 2nd Chronicles, which gives us the record, then Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther the queen. Let us sing the books of poetry, of poetry, of poetry. Let us sing the books of poetry, the songs the Jews sang. Job the patient, Psalms of David, the Proverbs of a wise one, and then Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon. Let us sing the major prophets, major prophets, major prophets. Let us sing the major prophets, the greatest of all. Isaiah, Jeremiah, who wrote Lamentations, then Ezekiel and Daniel, who were true to their God. Now this one's tough. These are the minor prophets. Pay close attention to the names when we get to the bottom. Let us sing the minor prophets, minor prophets, minor prophets. Let us sing the minor prophets. There are 12 of them all. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Whew, that was tough, wasn't it? You all remember all those names? I doubt very seriously that you'll be able to remember them all in just 1 week. But the good thing about videos like this is that it'll be posted to the internet and you can come back and watch it as many times as you want to. I know your parents will want you to watch this video at least 5 times a day and sing that song all the time. I doubt it, but maybe they'll let you watch enough that you can learn the books of the Old Testament. All right, we're going to sing another song. And this is one of the songs that all the kids love every year, Vacation Bible School. It's a song about a sea in Galilee. So everybody get your hands up. All right, y'all remember we make the sea sound, but it's actually talking about a sea like an ocean. And we're to make the water sound, but we all remember the song, don't you? There's a sea, there's a sea, there's a sea in Galilee. There's a boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's a boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's a boat, there's a boat. There's a boat in the Sea of Galilee, and there's a man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's a man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's a man, there's a man, there's a man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee, and there are hands on the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's hands on the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's hands, there's hands, there's hands on the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee, and there are nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's nets, there's nets, there's nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. And there are fish in the nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's fish in the nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's fish, there's fish, there's fish in the nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. If you're a little bitty and you're just learning that one, you learn it so that when we have Vacation Bible School, you can sing it, and we can sing it faster and faster and faster. So there's 3 good songs for you tonight. I appreciate you joining in singing time, but guess what time it is now? It's not singing time. As a matter of fact, it's really interesting because guess what time it is? It's Bible story time. Are y'all ready? All right, everybody sit down. If you were standing up doing the Sea of Galilee, you can go ahead and sit down and listen to the story. I'm going to tell you the story, and some of you probably have heard of it. How many of you ever heard of the story of David and Goliath? Some of you have? Oh, I know. I heard some of you say, I've heard that story. Well, listen to it again, and let's listen to the story of David and Goliath. The story is actually going to pop up on the screen, so everybody just follow along. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes between Soko and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet with the Philistines. And the Philistines occupied one hill, and the Israelites occupied another hill, and they had a valley in between them. And a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out from the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits in a span, which is about 9 feet 6 inches tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head. He wore a scale of armor of bronze that weighed 5,000 shekels of brass. His legs were covered with bronze greaves, and he had a bronze javelin slung across his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's beam, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels of brass. And his shield bearer went out in front of him. And Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of David? Choose a man and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight me and kill me, we will become your slaves. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our slaves and serve us." And then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight together." And upon hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and the rest of the Israelites were very dismayed and terrified. For 40 days the Philistines came forward. Every morning and every evening he took his stand. Now there was an older gentleman named Jesse who was an Israelite. And Jesse said to his son David, "Take this bag of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp because they're soldiers for Saul. And take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit and see how your brothers are and bring back some good news from them. They're with Saul and the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines." He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other, and David left his things with the keeper of supplies and ran to the battle lines to ask his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. "Send a man from Israel that we may fight. I defy Israel and I defy their gods." David heard it. And whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in fear. And David asked the men standing near him, he said, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" And they told him, "The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. And he'll also give his daughter in marriage, and he'll exempt his family from taxes." And when Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he got very angry with David, and he said, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down here just to watch the battle." And David said, "Now what have I done? Can I even speak?" And he turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him the same way they had before. What David said was overheard, and someone told Saul the king, and Saul sent for him. And David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. I, your servant, will go down and fight him." And Saul said, "You're not able to go down and fight against the Philistine. You're just a young man, and he has been a warrior since he was a young man." But David said to Saul, "Your servant, David, me, has been keeping sheep. And when a lion or a bear came out and carried off the sheep from the flock, I went after it and struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. And when it turned to me, I seized it by its hair and struck it and killed it. I've killed both the lion and the bear. Your Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine also." So Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." And Saul dressed David in his own tunic and put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. And David fastened his own sword over the tunic and tried walking around, but he couldn't because the armor was so big and he wasn't used to it. So he left the armor and he went down to the stream. He told Saul, "I can't go like this. I'm not used to them." He took his staff in his hand and he went down to the stream and he chose 5 smooth stones and he put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag with his sling in his hand. And he turned and walked out onto the battlefield and faced the Philistines. Meanwhile, the Philistine, Goliath, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer and closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, and glowing with handsome looks, he despised him, and he said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And then he said, "Come here. I will give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." And David turned and said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord God Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. And this day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcass of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." All those who were gathered for battle watched. As the Philistine moved closer and closer to attack him, David ran quickly across the field to meet the Philistine. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine right in the middle of his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. And David ran and stood over him and took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut his head off with his own sword. And the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, and they turned and they ran. The men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath, to the gates of Ekron, and their dead were strewn along the road all the way from Gath to Ekron. And when the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David defeated Goliath, and Israel was successful. Well, kids, what do you think about the story of David and Goliath? Some of you had heard that story before. I know that you had. You see David standing over Goliath right now? I know some of you have heard that story many, many times before. Maybe some of you have even heard it in Vacation Bible School. Some of you probably have heard it in Bible classes. And I know right now we're at home and we're kind of locked down. Take back up just one time. Hang on. I clicked one too many times on the screen. I was trying to go to a black screen. But I tell you what, it's an interesting story between David and Goliath. And it teaches us a lot about faith. It teaches us about being the type of people that we need to be. And it teaches us to always be obedient to God. He had faith in God. He trusted in God. And I appreciate you letting me have time to have this Bible story. It's about time for us to go. And we just appreciate so much you signing on and being with us.
Hey,
and we
Mr.
just,
Bob, what are you doing?
oh, hey, Susie, what are you doing? What are you doing here?
I live here.
Got your hair in your face. Let me fix it. You what?
I live here.
You live, oh, that's right. You live here in the
Yeah.
church building all the time, don't you?
All the time.
Well, what have you been up to?
Nothing. I'm so bored. I don't know what to
Bored?
do.
Why are you bored?
I can't see any of my friends, and I don't have school anymore.
Oh, because of the shelter-in-place order. You're doing like everybody else and just staying
Yes,
home?
I'm staying at home.
Well, everybody's staying at home, and I know it's kind of boring. I know that it's you can't get out, but it's the safest thing. And maybe before too long, we'll be able to get back out. And I know what everybody be excited about. And you know what? You know what I'm doing right now?
What are you doing?
I'm making a video for the kids at home. You can say
really?
hey to the kids at home. Everybody, y'all remember Susie from VBS? Well, I'm making a video for them because they're trapped at home too, just like you are.
We always
But, well, I'll tell you what, maybe before too long, though, we'll be able to get back out and be able to come back to church. Wouldn't that be great?
I sure
And
hope
maybe
so.
we'll even be able to come to VBS. I hope so. I hope
Fingers
this doesn't,
crossed.
I know, fingers crossed. Well, I'll tell you what, it's good to see you.
It's
Glad
good to
that
see
you're
you.
here. You want to sing a song together?
Yes.
I thought it'd be great if we could sing. You want to sing This Little Light of Mine?
Yes.
I was actually fixing to close out my video by singing that song. So if you'll join me, we'll sing that song together. Kids, you can follow along with what's on the screen. Y'all remember, get your lights out. Y'all ready? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine all the time, let it shine. All around the neighborhood, I'm gonna let it.
Wait.
What, Susie?
We can't go out to the neighborhood.
Oh, that's right. We have to shelter in place, don't
Yeah,
we?
we
gotta
can't
stay
go
safe.
to people.
Well, we can't go around the neighborhood, but I know where we can go.
Where?
All around the living room, can't we? All around the living room, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the living room, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the living room, I'm gonna let it shine all the time, let it shine. Hide it under a bushel.
No.
I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No, I'm gonna let it shine all the time, let it shine. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us. And you see it on the screen. We're just glad you were able to join us. Hopefully we'll keep putting out videos for all the little guys, but hopefully we won't have to make too many more before all this is over. Please stay safe. Thank you for joining us on Aniana Church of Christ Kids Time. Have a good afternoon.